Actually, that's not entirely true. My friend crashed my car. We were out on a cross-country road trip to California to visit one of my best friends out in Pasadena. It was my roommate from high school, Sonny, and I. It seemed like it was going well. We were out there to visit the beautiful beaches of California, explore the open roads, and the egregious traffic. And it all seemed to be going off without a hitch. Until we went to San Francisco. It was a 5-hour drive. We were going to go visit some of our upperclassmen friends who were studying there. It didn't seem like it would be a big deal, especially after driving 14 hours from Chicago to Denver. This shouldn't have been a difficult trip. Except by that time, I had driven from Chicago to Denver, to Las Vegas, to Pasadena, to San Diego, back to Pasadena again. So I was tired of being in front of the wheel. So I decided it was a good idea to let my friend who we were visiting out in California drive the car. Here are the 3 reasons why that was a bad idea. Number 1, when asked to the entire vehicle, who would like to drive the car instead of me? The man who we had visited out in California responded with, yeah, sure, I'll take a crack at it. Number 2, about an hour driving through Interstate 5 North, he decided to confess to us, and this was the best time to do it, apparently, that he's not actually a good driver, and last time he drove a car, he rear-ended someone. 10 minutes later, Sonny is critiquing his driving skills, and he responds with, look at how many of us aren't dead, you're welcome. About 15 minutes later, we swerved left, swerved right, swerved left one last time, and went 50 miles head-on into the guardrail. The front of my car folded up, dust billowed everywhere, our windshield cracked, and all of us were thrown up against the front of the vehicle. We scoured out into the middle of the median and tried desperately to find the injuries that were sure to be on our bodies, but we could find nothing. We were all somehow uninjured. At this point in the narrative where you realize somehow we're somehow okay, I want to back up before we left for the trip. Sonny and I, being the people that we are, were searching for food out in the grocery stores before we left for the trip. Because we had 14 hours to drive to Denver, and of course we wanted to be eating the entire time. And Sonny decided he wanted to set his heart on a can of dented beefaroni. If we don't buy it, no one else will. For the rest of the trip, Sonny was transfixed with this can of beefaroni. On the 14-hour drive to Denver, he kept looking back, looking forward, looking back, looking forward, and I had to swat his hand away every time he tried to reach for it. When we got to the Colorado National Monument, he decided that the only thing that he could possibly eat over the campfire was this can of beefaroni. I kept having the state of mind to be able to tell him that that was not the right idea, that there was better food for us to be eating. The only time that I didn't have this state of mind was when we crashed the car. In a state of calling my parents, calling the tow company, calling the police, looking down southbound, waiting for that tow truck to arrive to carry our car to Kettleman City, a nowhere town with a dingy hotel and a Denny's, there was nothing I could do but focus on my crashed car. And I had not the state of mind to pay attention to my kindred traveler now rummaging through the back of my vehicle, crashed up against the Guardian rail. About 2 minutes later, as I'm staring 5 south, waiting for that tow truck to get here, I hear a sound that plays over and over again in my head to this day. I look to my right, and I see Sonny finally getting the chance to eat that can of dented beefaroni with the lid of the aluminum can. And what I can only imagine was a scene from an absurdist sitcom and not my real life. He then turns to me and says, hey, do you have a fork? That story isn't completely true. When I was growing up, one of the most consistent cycled lessons that my mom tried to impart on me was this idea of listening. She always told me that listening was vital to empathy. And I agree with her. It's important to our mindful growth of people for us to listen to our peers, our relatives, our parents, and even strangers. But I'm not here to talk about listening. Sorry, Mom. I'm here to talk about talking. You see, in high school, I was given the chance to be part of this program called LEAD, which stood for Leadership, Education, and Development. And my friends will constantly hear me talk about this program because it was so important to me growing up in high school. But one of the reasons it was so vital, I think, to my learning is because at the core of this program was the idea of discussion and discourse. I knew that learning was related to talking, but I never really had the language to explain how. And it wasn't until my senior year of working with this program that I think I found out why talking with each other is so important to our learning. So, one day, when I was working on the pedagogy for this program, I was working with one of my really good friends, and we were talking about a specific leadership style that was really important to that module we were discussing. And we were focusing on women in the workplace. And I made the observation that during the 50s and 60s, there became a much higher representation of democratic leadership as women rose to more prominence in the workplace during this time period. This was in the midst of a heated discussion, and we had been throwing back for hours what we were going to include in the module, and she suddenly stopped and looked at me and she said, "Wow, that's a really great observation." And I sat stunned too, because I agreed with her. It was a really cool observation. I didn't really grasp the validity of my own statement until I had actually made it. We immediately integrated it into the module. I learned an important lesson on the value of discussion and discourse that day. Conversation and speech illuminates the opaque reality of our own perspectives, our ideals, thoughts, and opinions. And this is why I think discussion is so vital to our education and growth as individuals. Try and talk to someone after the SPARC conversation today. I don't mean like, say, "Hey, how you doing?" I mean like a real conversation. Engage with them. If you're engaged in that conversation, there's no way for you to get sidetracked. Talking with another person head-on is the only time that you really have a one-track mind. Your focus is solely on the beautiful tool of language and to craft ideas in a physical landscape of verbal interaction. Left to our devices, our minds can wander. Thoughts are haphazard, even disorganized. But conversation, when you're honed in on that, that's the only time you can be focused on crafting genuine ideas. Putting your ideas in a verbal landscape makes them tangible and real. It makes them present in the moment in which you can evaluate them for their quality, accuracy, and even your agreement. Because sometimes we say things we don't even mean. And it takes putting them out into the physical scape before us, before we can actually evaluate them. But that's not all. Speaking may help us grow as developing individuals with more sophisticated opinions and ideas, but it also connects us with the people around us in one of the most human ways we have access to. And usually, this comes in the format of storytelling. Flashback to that story about my car. Storytelling is such an important part of our lives. Telling stories allows us to grasp our disconnected experiences as full narratives and consolidate episodes in a meaningful way. This way we can create sense and identity from arbitrary experiences. In discussion, we uncover meaning. In storytelling, we can create our own. Honestly, that was a terrifying experience for me. Crashing my car, that is. It was a near-death experience, and I'm lucky to this day, and thankful every day, for being able to walk away from that experience with no injuries to either myself or my friends. I tell that story with a smile now because I can look back at it with a sense of acceptance, but on top of that, I like to frame the story the way I want to. Because if I say that story in a way that is humorous, it becomes dull to my fear and anxiety. I can frame it through a lens which is subjective, which is my own. Through a lens that highlights that can of dented beefaroni and not the feeling of dread in my stomach seconds before we crashed into the guardrail. Contrary to popular belief, I believe that storytelling is a discussion. These two things aren't really that different. Even if one individual does all the talking during a story, that conversation is experienced in more ways than just words. Take right now, for example. I'm looking at all of you and feeding off of your posture, your facial expressions, and even your reaction to my words. I might be the one speaking, but this discussion is all of ours. In this moment, I can create meaning, and I can share in its validity with all of you. Sonny's can of dented beefaroni off the side of a California interstate isn't just a story. It's a part of me that I can share with the people around me. It's a glimpse into my life the way I experience it in the most genuine way I can convey. It's intimate, it's personal, and it's so very human. I'd like to finish with one of my favorite quotes by Maggie Kuhn. No matter how important it is that we're always listening to each other, we have to make sure there's something important to listen to. So as Maggie Kuhn says, speak your mind, even if your voice shakes.